For the first lot, Gandhi was next to God. I mean, he could do no wrong. His mass appeal was so strong, and he sort of cut across class and caste and all of those divides in the last 30 years. Of course, there have been other aspects of Gandhi's character that has been explored. So there are problematic areas that have been highlighted about his views on, say, caste. Today, in some sections, there is absolute vilification of Gandhi, which even to Gandhi's strongest critics, it is an unpleasant thing to hear.
The moment I speak about Gandhi or his relevance, the answer that I get is stop living in the past. This is how disdainfully he is being treated. Is that something you see as well? This whole dismissal of the past, that conversation, that discourse. How do we correct that? How do we reclaim that?
I mean, how does a person live on? There are ways to live on and there are ways to live on. One way to live on is through names, through statues, through memorials. And another way is to live on through your work. I mean, just replicate it in other people who are trying to do the same work. And I think Gandhi will definitely live on in that way.
"75 years after the Mahatma's assassination, is his pedestal just a little bit shaky? With movies made in the name of his killer Nathuram Godse, temples being dedicated to him, there is more than a veering from the course when it comes to the great Mahatma. Do we need to reclaim that legacy? Or is that legacy still there, buried just a little bit?" Joining me in conversation today, Veena Venugopal. She is the author of the book Independence Day, A People's History. And also joining me, Rishi Mazumdar. He is the co-founder of the Indian History Collective, and they have both given in their views, sometimes happily agreeing to disagree. A quick reminder, also do like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jyotsna Mohan, for first-hand news, views and agenda.
Rishi, I'm going to kick off this conversation with you today. 75 years after the Mahatma's assassination, that pedestal kind of seems a bit shaky, doesn't it? For me, growing up, I would never have imagined to reach this point where I would think, oh my God, we don't really see his photos when it is Gandhi Jayanti or whether it is, January. He's missing.
It's interesting that you say that because, I mean, obviously it's something that my team and me and all of us, we were talking about as well, especially whether it's Gandhi Jayanti, whether it's the death anniversary of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi or Mahatma Gandhi. This might seem a little far-fetched, but I feel he's one of the most influential people on the planet today, actually. Not just in India. I feel that even though we do not see his photographs and we do not see him commemorated or revered, we see him discussed. And whether you agree with Gandhi, whether you disagree with Gandhi, I feel in the last 3 decades, we've had a lot of interesting debates and arguments over Gandhian caste, Gandhian women, even the religiosity that was often involved in Gandhi's socio-political messaging. And I feel in that way, one is connected to Gandhi. One sees Gandhi now for his huge and massive contribution, of course, but one also sees the nuts and bolts behind that contribution. And I find that very exciting. And of course, there are a lot of conversations on social media that are hugely polarized and some of them just purely ill-informed. But when I see a lot of discussions that are happening nowadays, whether with young people or people our own age, or people who are from the older generation with other generations, that's what I find.
I want to get Veena in on exactly the same thing. Veena, do you agree, disagree? Do you have something to add to that?
Well, I both agree and disagree with what was said. One, let's just sort of divide this in periods of time. So when I was writing the book, I was talking to people who were around at the time of the freedom movement and then soon after. And so the way they think of Gandhi is very different from, say, people who were born 10, 15 or 20 years later. So which means people who were born in the 60s view Gandhi. So for the first lot, Gandhi was next to God. I mean, he could do no wrong. His mass appeal was so strong and he sort of cut across class and caste and all of those divides. And no matter where you were in the country, no matter where you stood on the polarizing debates of that day as well, whether it is religion or caste, you still sort of revered Gandhi. So you may have disagreed with some parts of whatever Gandhi was saying. So, for example, I spoke to this lady who grew up in a Dalit slum in Maharashtra, and so she said, of course, in the slum there was always this Ambedkar versus Gandhi debate, but everybody still loved and respected Gandhi, even if they didn't always agree with him. So for that, a lot of people, I think Gandhi was next to God. For them, their devotion to him was absolute. In the last 30 years, of course, there have been other aspects of Gandhi's character that has been explored. So there are problematic areas that have been highlighted about his views on, say, caste, or was he sort of on a bit to appease Muslims, etc. And so there has been a little bit of a critical analysis of Gandhi, but I think despite that, there is, even in that lot, a continued respect for Gandhi. You may disagree with him more, but you still sort of acknowledge his contributions, etc. I think today's rhetoric is actually quite different from both of those. Today, in some sections, there is absolute vilification of Gandhi, which even to Gandhi's strongest critics, it is an unpleasant thing to hear. I agree with the fact that the way we look at Gandhi has changed, but I disagree that it is a good thing. I feel the pendulum is now swinging too sort of sharply in the other direction, and there is really a risk of Gandhi's legacy being tarnished, and what will kids in India be studying about Gandhi 15 years from now? I'm not so sure that it will be the same sort of history that we study.
I was actually going to ask you this eventually, Veena, the fact that you work so closely with, and you spoke to people who had, who were a part of a partition, or, had just come out of the other side and heard their stories. For them, my sense, and, I've seen it with my grandfather as well, Gandhi was this center figure. So, everything is happening around you, but you're holding on to something, right? And he was the person you're holding on to. Now, increasingly, and I'm not speaking about people who were born in the 60s, I'm speaking about people who are even younger now, younger than us. They have no sense of history. Yeah. When history is given to you on a platter, the moment I speak about Gandhi or his relevance, the answer that I get is stop living in the past. This is how disdainfully he is being treated. That's my experience. Is that something you see as well? I mean, how do you, like you said, history will be taught differently, but how do you teach the children today? The people in their 20s.
I am not an expert on how do you teach the children today. I do think that that everything is a cycle, and this is sort of the wrong end of the Gandhi cycle. And hopefully in a later time, Gandhi will come back like bell-bottom pants or whatever is in fashion. So how can you teach the 20-year-olds today? Especially about Gandhi, there is enough that is written. So there are lots of avenues to be taught. But I think the problem is the rhetoric and the environment. That is the sort of slightly distasteful bit of what is happening to Gandhi's legacy at this point in time. So will Gandhi come back? I feel he will. I think that there will be sort of a move again towards sort of celebrating what he stood for. How do we teach? It's easy to sort of figure out how to teach in an academic setting, but in terms of the general discourse, I think really there isn't much to be done, but like have discussions like this, talk more about what he has done, or what the contributions have been, and also critically analyze him. I don't think that Gandhi should be like this sort of sacred cow that you cannot say anything bad about. And I think that the more sort of you analyze him, and the more sort of you talk about him in real terms, the more real he becomes. He was a human being. He had his own frailties. He made his own mistakes. And it's okay to acknowledge them. But I think it should be a scholarly acknowledgement as opposed to an uneducated dismissal, which is what Gandhi is saying now.
this whole dismissal of the past, that conversation, that discourse. How do we correct that? How do we reclaim that?
Answers in conversations like the one we're having right now on a platform that is populated with a lot of young people, because we were talking about people in their 20s. The answers in books like the one that Veena has written. And there's so many other young scholars, some middle-aged scholars, older scholars writing some fantastic books right now that are out. The answers also, we run a history project, as you well know, called the Indian History Collective, where we essentially try to do this, where we try to look at primary sources, or we look at scholarly work. We put it out through social media, we put it out online. We try to put it out in a language, and we work with a team of scholars who are people who've done their post-graduation in history, young, really talented students, but also people who really understand social media and digital media today. This is one example. There are various other history platforms actually right now on Instagram, online, on YouTube, and there are, of course, the other side. There are the others as well, and by the others I mean people who are putting out extremely ill-informed, polarizing, incorrect views, politically motivated in order to take things to an extreme, to inspire a lot of bigotry and hatred. There is this side as well. So that's I feel the only answer, that if one is interested in putting out, in examining, in talking about the great things that Gandhi did, while also examining Gandhi in a scholarly way, that is the way to do it. That said, I just like to add one more thing. And I feel that if anyone, and this has been proven even in the past, post Gandhi's death, there were various people who questioned whether his legacy would live on in any way at all. Even in an independent India that sort of revered him. And you had, not just in India, but world over, you had, while he was alive, of course, you had African American leaders, Howard Thurman, Benjamin Mays come down to meet him. You had Martin Luther King, hugely inspired by him and his work and his ability to mobilize the masses with truth, with his truth, what he saw as truth. There are endless examples. I don't want to just rattle off names, but there's so many out there. When it comes to work, you always constantly asking yourself this question about impact. How do I make impact? How do I really affect change? And whenever any young person does that, somewhere the answer does lead you to studying Gandhi.
Can I be the devil's advocate here and say that, all these global figures and his global reach, and is that a reason for us to not forego him completely because of the fact that, he's such a global figure that hum hi agar unko chhod denge, then, what is there for us?
And that's an interesting perspective. It's an interesting question. It's an interesting thought. And I don't know whether that's behind, but I feel, and that's the point that I was making, was that even if you do not use Gandhi's name, if you decide, I will not take Gandhi's name, if anybody talks to me about Gandhi, I will pretend this person did not exist in history. Anytime you think of starting a movement, whether in this country or in another country, and a major movement, a massive movement, you will have to go back to Gandhi's methods, Gandhi's ideas, Gandhi's politics. So, how does a person live on? There are ways to live on, and there are ways to live on. One way to live on is through names, through statues, through memorials. And another way is to live on through your work. Just replicate it in other people who are trying to do the same work. And I think Gandhi will definitely live on in that way.
I think one of the problems really is that we and the generation that's younger than us, we can't really fathom how popular Gandhi was and what a master of communication he was. So, for example, and throughout the reporting of the book, I didn't speak to anybody who was not a Gandhi fan. And a lot of people actually didn't remember, or some did not even know, that independence had been declared. So a lot of these people who I spoke to were 4, 5, 6 years old when India was declared independent, and they had really no memory of what they were doing when independence was declared. But to the last person, everybody knew where they were when they heard about Gandhi's death. So that really, so he was bigger than than even the freedom movement, in the sense that he was the face of it. There were other leaders, of course, both at national level and in regional levels. But Gandhi was bigger than India in many sense, at least in their world, in their heads. I think one of the things is that we really don't understand how he was so universally popular. We don't have an example at the moment that we can say, oh, this person is like Gandhi. So one of the difficulties in appreciating Gandhi now is this lack of ability to imagine what he was then. And even if you sort of see the sort of old film footage of him walking, the Dundee March footage and things like that, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, people just sort of leave everything and walk behind him. I think that there will definitely be some level of Gandhi fanboys and fangirls who will take his legacy forward. I mean, he will not be forgotten in India. And it's a smallish group now. I mean, if Gandhi's legacy sort of was nationwide in 1948, it's probably like a smaller percentage of it now. But it will never die. And B, I think you are right in the sense that the world is sort of taking sort of ownership of Gandhi and his teachings and his fabulousness, as it were. And so that will actually be one of the motivations for us to also not give up on. Because at some point we will say, no, this is our guy and we have to reclaim him. So this gives me hope. Actually, and I don't feel badly about the fact that in non-Indian parts of the world, his legacy stays alive. I think that is the reason that we will go back to sort of finding Gandhi. But if we can just sort of all get ourselves to imagine what he did, and just sort of watching some of these clips, which are also on YouTube and Instagram, and bare basic reading, it's phenomenal what he could do, and I don't think anybody around the world has been able to mimic it to the degree that he had. I mean, this was like a Pied Piper of a level that one cannot even imagine.
You've mentioned Instagram, YouTube, and in this world of social media where everything gets hijacked very differently. It's easy to hijack, and you're going to speak about Godse, and you're going to speak about a movie that's been released on him, and he's mainstreamed, and it becomes a normal discourse. How tough is it going to be? Because like you said, it's a phase and we'll reclaim him, but this phase is different. There was never social media before the way it is now.
Yeah, I mean, it is not easy, that is for sure. I mean, I was talking to my father the other day, and he's shocked that in his lifetime Gandhi has sort of gone from riding the crest of the wave to sort of or slipping towards the bottom of it. And if you sort of looked at who would be remembered the most from the 19th century, I think Gandhi and Mandela would definitely have been the sort of top two names, right? And so it is unfathomable to us, and it is a little disconcerting that it has come to this. But I think that all debate is good, but ignorance is not. And again, I'm hoping that because the scholarship on Gandhi is so extensive, it will finally triumph. Because if you go looking for Gandhi, there is so much that you can find. Like I said, I feel that the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction now, but eventually it will come to a sort of steady state. And so I feel bad about a lot of the narrative around him now, but I'm not super worried about the future.
I feel, we've spoken about Gandhi as a mass communicator and a brilliant mass communicator, whom I feel the right as well as the left takes from today, by the way. I mean, no matter how much the right might the right might question Gandhi, but if you look at their methods in terms of communication, mass movement, you see a lot of lessons being learned from what Bapu did back then. personally, to me, Gandhi's greatest legacy is two things. One is the ability to engage with people, whether or not you agree with them. And I feel that Gandhi was such a stellar example of living this, to engage without prejudice. And you see this, for example, in the Gandhi and Ambedkar debates. You see it in the Gandhi and Tagore debates. He doesn't decide to say that, no, look, the country is with me. This guy's a friend of mine. He's a big writer. So what? Let him write something. I will ignore it. He actually engages in a debate. Similarly with Ambedkar, despite the ending being quite acrimonious and acerbic, he pushes Nehru when the first cabinet is there, telling him that you must make this man a part of the cabinet. It's that's a huge legacy and a takeaway from Gandhi. The other part of it is his ability. What astounds me personally is his ability to constantly evolve. So even when we look at things that we find problematic about what he's saying, he's brutally honest about his life, or with all its warts and quirks, and he's just putting it out there. Secondly, he's constantly examining it and evolving. And I think if we take a leaf out of that and engage with whatever is coming our way with that mindset, I feel that is a great gift that Gandhi has given us.
Sorry, I just want to add one anecdote which also ties in with what Rishi was saying about his ability to communicate. So one of the people that I spoke to, who does not feature in the book, is the grandson of this person who was later known as Madurai Gandhi. I mean, he was such a big disciple of Gandhi that he sort of absorbed all his principles, gave up this life, which was, he was born into an industrialist family, and sort of gave up, dedicated his life to living in the Gandhian way. And so his grandnephew, actually, who I was talking to, he sent me a couple of books in which they had reproduced Gandhi's letter to Madurai Gandhi. And at this time, Madurai Gandhi was not known as Madurai Gandhi. He was a young 20-something-year-old who was like a Gandhian in spirit. And he reached out to Gandhi, and Gandhi kept writing to him and checking in on him, and then he sort of, so he was reluctant to marry because he thought that wouldn't sort of allow him to live the life that he wanted as a Gandhian. And Gandhi wrote him a letter encouraging him to get married. And then when he had a child, Gandhi wrote to him saying, please feed your wife, all of these nutritious foods because she's nursing the baby and things like that. And I was amazed, like he was so sort of busy, and he took time to write to people who had just reached out to him. So Gandhi would have done very well in the social media world because, he was sort of sliding into people's DMs in a very good way, and he really knew how to work that system. It's also amazing how much headspace he had for all of this.
What a lovely anecdote, Veena. And it actually makes you think, you're right. I love the fact that he would slip into the DMs. That's wonderful, actually. His principles were always questioned even during the independence struggle, right? I mean, by the moderates. So would we have needed to tweak it a little bit in modern India?
I mean, I feel that during the independence struggle, if you look at the 20s, for example, when you see Gandhi was the great point, everyone else was raising counterpoints. So there was Gandhi, and then there was Tagore. There was Gandhi, then there was Ambedkar. There was Gandhi, and then there were the revolutionaries, let's say Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev. They're writing and saying that, no, we disagree with this, this, and this. But, even if you look at Gandhi's principles today, you can't, even back then, nobody was taking them, and I don't think he wanted anybody to take them and implement them as one would a holy book of any sort. He encouraged people to take them, engage with them, and then decide what they wanted to do with them and see how they wanted to interact with them and make them a part of their lives. One anecdote that I wanted to add was that actually, funnily for me, again, personally, 20 years ago, this is a long time ago in another life, I had started doing theatre in Prithvi Theatre in Bombay, and I had my introduction to theatre was through this play called Mahadev Bhai that was written by Ramu Ramanathan, which was the purpose of that play was actually to reclaim the legacy of Gandhi. This was a time when there was a play on Godse that had come out. There was a lot of Gandhi bashing going on in the mainstream discourse, and this was 20 years ago. So, and I was part of this play. I'd become the production in charge of the play, and become very close to it. And I traveled with it. We traveled to villages, performed it in English, Hindi, Gujarati, different languages, and I remember even at that time, this one particular scene that the actor and director Janni Pathak did, where he plays Gandhi, and he talks about the Dandi March, and the actor picking up a pinch of salt, and he says, any other leader, and frankly, you could just do it would go by motor car, go and break the law, but Gandhi decides to walk across an entire state. And it's interesting that in today's political discourse, when you see Congress decide to come back to the center stage of politics in some way, to the center stage of media opinion, let's say, you see they do this Bharat Jodo Yatra. So you see, what I'm trying to say is that ability Gandhi had of reading, not in a cynical way, but in a genuine way, what you needed to do to actually communicate with the person on the street. That is something that people are learning from and implementing even now. So I just thought I'd narrate that through a person.
I think the one exercise that I think about is I wonder what would have been had Gandhi lived for 20 more years and not died a violent death. Would he have then been like a crotchety old man coming in the way and sort of saying, no, all 5-year policies should be like rural focused, and so would he have tarnished his legacy in a way himself, or was this the timing of his death and the nature of his death, I think also is worth thinking about while thinking about Gandhi's legacy.
No, that's fair. Very fair. Maybe we start this conversation another day. If he had lived,
yes.
Where would he be? Or if he had lived in the social media world, right? That would have been fascinating. But Rishi and Veena, I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you so much.
This is great. Thank you so much.